All right, here we are live again when our leadership live series, or maybe field notes. We're kicking around new names, but same principle. We're excited to dig into important leadership concepts. Today it's communication, and we'll be on this topic for N+1 weeks. There are so many important aspects to communication for our clients, for leaders, anywhere, just for people who have relationships and have to talk to other people. Communication is super critical. So we're going to be pulling this apart, asking ourselves questions, poking at it, taking field notes, trying to understand it better from the empirical research and resources that are out there so that we can give you practical actions that you can try today, put on your Google Calendar, and make your organizations thrive. I'm here today with Nick. He's our director of operations, one of our guides, all around awesome guy. Spent a lot of time in the Marine Corps as a communications officer. We at Caring Leadership, for some reason, like combos. Maybe it's because communication is so important. And he'll be talking about communication from that perspective and just about communication from the perspective of a leader. So, Nick, welcome. Excited to be here with you. What is the worst communication that you've ever seen?
It's immediately going to go straight to a Marine Corps example. There'll probably be a lot of that, but that's where I'm kind of nested in. So uh, there's large scale exercises, a lot of Mountain 29 Palms, sunny 29 Palms. For anyone who doesn't know that area, it's right across from Joshua Tree National Park. Um, but it all stemmed around operational security for our network operations center during one of these large exercises. We weren't necessarily in a situation where we were going to be notionally targeted, but we were still standing up security to that. A lot of it was personality and past history driven. I wasn't necessarily one of the key actors, but I got to be on the receiving end of the results of this. So there were two kind of higher level officers who were in charge of this site, nor notionally in charge of the site. One had been told he was in charge, but functionally that was not the case. So there was a total lack of clear intent, clear messaging. So when two people started trying to like command the situation or control the situation, they were completely off. They weren't talking to each other because of past history or personality differences. So we basically had a site of 45 Marines who were supposed to be supporting the entire division with communication architecture set up. And that for the first probably 24, 48 hours, which is that critical time frame in any sort of military context, we were going back and forth between, are we doing this? Are we doing that? People are yelling at each other in the COC. So from a tempo perspective, from the morale of the team, from the effectiveness of that team, because those two individuals and the broader team, from basically from our G6 down, was not communicating clearly what the expectation was, how we wanted people to work together as a team. It just completely torpedoed us for the first probably week. I'll be honest, like those first 48 hours where we really felt the pain and suffering of it and the friction of it. But that it's people were already run ragged from those first 48 hours, and we had a whole 3 week exercise that was going to be like 24 hours nonstop. So the team was completely gutted already from the start. That's like from a communication perspective, like if you fail to do it effectively, it can have huge impacts, not just on the people that you're talking to, the conversation you're having, but your entire team will feel that, will see it, and it'll affect the way that you're doing your job. What
Yeah.
about you? Like, what is something that you've seen? I don't know if it'll be a similar military situation. It seems that that's a
Yeah.
common trend, or if it's something broader.
Well, I'm going to go super narrow, honestly. One of my core values is truth. And something that I'm thinking about a lot in my relationship with my wife, who I love dearly, is I will layer communication sort of on purpose, implicitly. Like, I don't think through, I'm going to do it this way, but I will layer communication in really unhelpful ways. So if she says, even this morning with our 6 month old, do you can you take him to hold him so he'll go back to sleep at 5 a.m. One, I'm tired, so that's a layer. And I say, yeah, which if you wrote that would be, yeah. And what I mean is, yeah, of course. But I also mean, I don't really think he's going to go back to sleep. And I really want to read the Wall Street Journal. And can I just hold him and do that? Or can you hold him for 5 more minutes and maybe he will? There's all this latent information that is packed into that tone of, yeah. But she hears it totally different. She hears it as you're not being supportive, or I've been up with him for the last hour and seriously, you can't hold him for 5 minutes to go back to sleep. And so, and I think we do that because I want to tell her all of those things that I just mentioned of the Wall Street Journal. I don't think he's going to fall back asleep, blah, blah, blah. And it's much easier to say it in the tone of, yeah. And I want on paper legally to be able to say, well, I said, yeah, why are you mad at me? Which is so unfair to her or whoever you're communicating with. We use tones to communicate all these double meanings. And I think the problem is they're not even clear. So my core value is truth, and I'm obfuscating what I'm trying to communicate on purpose so that I have culpable deniability and all these things, which is just wildly unhelpful. So that's where I think communication can go wrong, is when we layer in tones and assume that people understand what we're saying. But back to you, we always start with definitions. Well, we don't actually, because we just talked about other things, but we like to start with definitions because when we're communicating, if we don't have a common picture, we're communicating about different things. So how do you define communication? And is there a difference between the definition of communication and what quality communication looks like?
I absolutely, I think so. Again, kind of from this is very like Marine Corps focused, but we always made the argument that we were communication officers, but we really should have been command and control officers. And I think how that connects to kind of a business world in the world we're in now is, I think communication in a business from top down is truly a command and control. And I say command and control, it's I'm at the CEO here up at the top, giving directive, giving intent, giving vision down. And then from those, the technicians, the people on the front line of it, or those middle tier managers giving refinement back up to the top, giving feedback up to the top, that's the control piece. So when you hear someone in the military talk about command and control or C2, that's the flow, the interchange. So I think the broader idea of communication is, how do you convey your vision, your feelings, your values effectively, and how do you come off in such a way that you are presenting that to someone that they can understand. When you get to that, I think that's where the quality piece comes in. Firm intent, firm mission and vision statements, having established feedback mechanisms that allow for delegated authority, but then also clear lateral limits and strategic touch points. Like, I think that is where really quality communication, especially in the business world, comes into play. Do you have the systems in place where you are talking, and to what you were saying earlier, you're talking with the nuance of tone, the nuance of what do I actually mean? What's the truth of what I'm saying? And is that coming out? Am I being transparent with that? Or am I just assuming that someone's going to understand it, sending it downrange, and completely missing the mark? And then the systems aren't there where someone can ask for that feedback and refinement and have the conversation of, okay, what do you actually mean when you say that? So I think that's the big difference between how I view just standard communication or maybe subpar communication and quality. I'm interested if that meshes with what you see or what you've heard, or if that's something that you agree with or not.
Yeah, I love your idea of command and control, because when I hear that, I think of classic hierarchical military. Everybody probably thinks, oh, Nick just yells at all his people and that's command and control. But really, it's the trickle up of what's going on the ground. Napoleon needed to know what's happening with his troops to make good decisions, and that information going back up the chain of command is as much or more valuable than what's coming down. I've thought about communication. How do you define this simply for a long time? And I think for me, it's just developing a shared understanding. So we all have our little bubbles, our own worlds. We don't even know if we're real. Maybe this is the matrix and we're all computer programs. When I say one thing, a sports car, you think something, you think a Maserati, I think a Ferrari, you think yellow, I think red. And so developing a shared understanding, maybe more context describing it, that is a shared understanding of the battle space. If the command and control is going down, this is what we need to do, and going up, we can't do that because of X, Y, and Z. You're creating a shared understanding. It's the flow of information, of context throughout an organization, so that everybody's on the same page. And this seems super simple, but when, to my earlier point, you layer in tone and body language, and to your point, personalities and priorities, and maybe unspoken intents and goals, it gets really murky really fast, and you don't have a shared understanding. You don't have a clear commander's intent. You don't have a clear vision. People are all rowing in different directions. And in terms of quality, I think quality communication is concise and succinct, meaning that it doesn't take any more time or effort than it needs to. And that could be someone I know well. Like if you and I are guiding and we see something a little bit not copacetic, it might be a raised eyebrow, and you're like, yep, I'm watching that. And that's all you need. That whole communication, it goes down with just a raised eyebrow and a slight nod. No one else even notices. It might be a 20-page dissertation vision for where the company is and where the company's going. That's really in-depth and technical if you're trying to start a biotech firm or something like that. And it might be a poem, because the shared understanding that T.S. Eliot is trying to create, God knows what it is in the wasteland, but that requires those words in that order to create the same feeling, the same context, the same ideas that he's trying to portray in his poem to a reader. So it doesn't mean that it has to be super short, but it needs to be as short as it can be to get that point across. Now I'm self-consciously, maybe I'm talking too long.
You just validated the careers of every English teacher and every English professor out there. Like, yes, finally, someone understands.
That's right. Well, I don't understand the wasteland, but I do understand that poetry takes more time to convey the feelings that the poet wants you to convey, or to get the shared understanding. And that's what's fun. Go ahead.
I love how you mentioned like the body language piece too, because I think it layers in with the tone piece that you're just talking about. And I think when you think of really effective communicators, really effective teams who do communication well, it is the like inherent communication of, I can look at you and with a glance, you know exactly what I'm thinking, what I'm about to say. Those are the teams that everyone always talks about as being like, oh, fire and forget. Like they're great, they're fantastic, they're on top of it. Like they have so much momentum, so much effectiveness in their work because they worked the personal relationships to be able to communicate with a glance, with a single word, with a raised inflection on a certain word. And it's so like nuanced. And so I think there's such a science to it that I know there's a lot of people who work on that. Like I've recently read Alison Brooks one talk with like the science of conversation.
Yeah,
like she spent a whole book talking about a singular word or a single topic or a single piece of humor that you inject into a conversation can completely change the outcome of that conversation, the outcome of that communication that you're having, which is super interesting.
I love that you brought up that book, and I'm putting a form in the chat here for people if they're watching. We'll put it in other social media as well, but we have so many resources that we're reading and synthesizing to have these conversations. So if you're interested in the whole list, fill out the form. We will email you all of these books and articles and podcasts. I think, Nick, I think about the Navy SEALs. I guess that comes to mind in terms of operating at that level, and it doesn't come after a day or a week. It comes through a lot of training. I love working with veterans in the business world. I know I can rely on them. I know they're going to be on time. I know if a veteran says, yes, we're going to do that, I don't need a contract. They're going to do that. But that's because we have some common understanding of the world. We've had a common experience. I love people who love the outdoors. I can enter a conversation at a different level with that person because we both love skiing. And when we laugh about some skiing joke, we already have common footing. And that's not the reality for a lot of business teams, people leave, people have kids, people get new jobs, people get burned out. So there's this constant churn. I'm curious if you have any ideas on how to try to get to that level of a raised eyebrow means something to everyone on the team when people are coming in and out pretty frequently.
This is maybe feel a little bit can, but like I think our methodology in getting people outside is like it's a really easy way to do that. Like we've been talking so much about like type 2 fun adventures and shared experiences. I think that is for the military at least, that shared history that you're talking about, that shared understanding is generated from the friction that comes with boot camp, the friction that comes from kind of stressful environments. So I think that's why the method of getting people outside and challenging them in outdoor situations has been so effective for us and is such an effective method, because those shared frictions, those shared the shared adventures, those shared interactions, that's where you start to develop those. And I think it happens far faster there in the outdoors where you're hands-on than potentially in a boardroom where it's, okay, I saw you raise your eyebrow during that meeting. Like, what was like that? There's follow-on conversations that need to come with that. But if you're on a rock wall and someone says, whoa, 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 you know exactly what that means immediately. And you know what that tone of voice means immediately. It means stop, hold on, something doesn't look right. So the next time you hear that, you already know what that means. Like there's no questioning it. That's the inherentness, that's the speeding up of communication. So I think that is like, I've had amazing conversations and communication with people outdoors because of those type of things. And those are people that I can continue to consider very close friends and very close confidants, because we've gone through those things. We've talked about things, and maybe an environment that is more open to long-term learning, long-term retention of, hey, when you say it like that, what do you mean?
Yeah.
I'm curious if that's like if you see a similar thing, or if you've seen, because you've obviously taught as well. So I wonder is there a difference between that in a classroom with a bunch of MBA students versus a company that we've taken out to Santee to go bouldering, for example?
Yeah, I wish I could do an MBA class while we're bouldering, rappelling. I think the outdoors, it strips away distractions. There's so many distractions. I am guilty of this. I'm sure all of us are, listening to someone speak to us while we're looking at our phone to check our email. That's ridiculous. Our brains are not wired to do that. And it is disrespectful, frankly. If you're trying to communicate with me and I'm looking at that, geez, like what does that say to you about how important what you're trying to tell me, the shared understanding we're trying to develop is? So it strips away distractions. It also requires a higher level of being explicit. So like one example, we always tell people this when we're operating with a group out in the cold weather, we tell people, like, hey, if your fingers get cold, you have to tell us right away. If you don't, if you wait an hour or two, you might lose a finger. Like that frostbite is real. If it starts to get cold and you say, hey, my left finger, my left pointer finger is getting cold, we can fix it. That's easy to fix if you're being super explicit. And that back to, yeah. I'm not being explicit. I'm trying to pack all this ton of meaning into one tone. So being outdoors causes us to have to be more explicit because of the consequences. But I also think we just onboarded a new SkillBridge fellow today, and we do this often, and we encourage our clients to do it often. Like a user guide, just talking through, and it's super valuable. Even we've been working together for a while. Bob's been on the team for a while, and hearing you talk about, like, here are my core values. Here's like some of my pet peeves. Here's when you can and can't text me. Here's what notifications I get on my phone. Here's what my goals are. All of these conversations around a user guide, getting on the same page as a team, are so valuable. Yeah. You ought to almost be doing that quarterly. We kind of are as we onboard new fellows. Yeah. It naturally happens, but it's super useful to hear from people what they value and how they want to be communicated to, and what they are good at and what they might not be good at. Those things are critical, and fast track that. Now when Bob says something about trust. I know it's one of his core values and it's really important. I better tune in and listen, not like, oh yeah, trust. Like everybody talks about trust or
Yeah.
whatever. So
I
yeah.
think the other, and I'm glad you brought up the like the technology piece again too. Like we did that meeting face to face. Like it's granted, it's kind of Zoom land, so it's not as good as like being in person, like physically seeing someone. But the number of like missteps over that, like the total lack of tone when you text someone, like it amplifies the exact thing you were talking about when we started this. Of you can't how are you saying that? How are you discussing that when you at least see someone's face, even if it's not necessarily in person, it's over Zoom. Like you can pick up those little physical nuances. Technology is great and it has expanded our ability, expanded the scope of our communication, but I think it has also narrowed it down. Like you were talking about distractions, like some of the physical distractions are actually critical to communication. Like those, like he's not really paying attention right now. His eyes are drifting off. Or like the what I just said, he kind of scrunched his face. Like it might distract you from what you're saying, but that makes the communication more pure, more transparent, and you don't get that over maybe a Google chat or an email. I mean, you can, but it's usually like all caps locked, angry, red-faced emojis, and like, but that's like the level of work that you have to put in to express that emotion on a digital link. Where if you see someone in person, and it's very clear if someone's angry if you're in person because you can hear it in their voice, you can see it in the redness of their cheeks. Like all of those things are part of that. But I just thought that was really poignant what you were saying with the technology piece.
Yeah, I think researchers would call it context rich communication. The less you know someone, I can pack a lot of meaning into a text to my wife because we have a long-standing relationship and we've texted and talked and have that basis. So I don't
Yeah.
need a lot of context to drive quality communication. But if I don't know someone and I sent the same text, they'd probably be like, "This is wildly inappropriate." I'm just kidding. Just
Yeah.
kidding. You need that context-rich environment with people you don't know, and that is important as you onboard new people onto the team, even if it is Zoom. We're at time here to start wrapping up and giving some practical takeaways, practical tips. Next week we'll probably talk about feedback because
Yeah.
that's a big subject this month for the company and what we're really focusing on. But in terms, I guess I'll give two practical takeaways. One is be way more explicit than you think you need to be. And that means being explicit when you're communicating your vision or what you need or whatever it is, but also asking for feedback and testing out ideas. Like, Nick, when I said that, you drifted off. Is it not interesting or what's going on there? And not
Yeah.
like a accusatory, like, Nick, why aren't you paying attention to me? But Nick, when I said that, you drifted off a little bit. Am I off base?
Yeah.
And then you might say, like, no, actually, there's a mosquito that has been flying around my head for the last 10 minutes and is driving me crazy. And that's great. We have a shared understanding of what happened. Or you might say, like, yeah, I think you half baked that idea. You could do better. And that is also super valuable. So being explicit in delivering communication and what you need, and also being explicit in asking for that feedback of, I noticed this. I noticed that you're looking at your phone while I'm talking to you. What's going on there? Oh,
Yeah.
well, I'm waiting to hear from the doctor about my dad's surgery. Okay, great. Or like, I'm wildly uninterested in what you have to say. Also good to know. So those are be more explicit is the goal for the week from me. What about you?
I think it's so much as like retrospection too, of like looking at yourself and the way you independently communicate. So the joke that one of my officers always says, like, I can tell when what I'm saying is making you angry because your cheeks flush so bright red. And I had no idea that I was doing that. And so then I was super aware of it. So then, and you can't, that's a physical reaction. It's kind of hard to tamp that down, but you can address it immediately. Cause like we'd be in a meeting, someone would say something and our officer would be like, Nick, see your cheeks again red. I'm like, yeah, I know. Like, and like, but it turned into a way to communicate about it. Um, But knowing that about myself has helped me to be a better communicator just from the physical piece of, hey, my cheeks are red. It's just really hot in the building right now. I promise. Like, I'm not mad about what you're saying. Or, no, I'm not mad about what you're saying, but I'm passionate about what you're saying. But I needed someone to give me the feedback and talk to me about that. Be like, hey, did you know that this was something that happened with you when like this thing happened? But it's also critical to look at yourself and accept that feedback, or think about, okay, I do say that, or I have this common word. We've talked about, from coming from the military, I had a shop of all male Marines. So my thing was always guys, which that's not the same context in the world, in the common world that we live in now. It's completely like using that genderless language is important, and it does matter to people, and it makes you a more effective communicator. So that's something I've had to really work on, of just changing what a common phrase for me is. But that again requires feedback from people you trust and people that you value, and those who have your best interest at heart. Listen to them, asking it, and like an actionable tip could be talk to your spouse or a partner or a friend and be like, hey, is there something that I do that's really common that you see when I'm talking that makes you feel one way, or that you maybe think I don't notice? Ask that question of, is there something that I'm missing, just from a general communication perspective? And I guarantee you're going to learn something not only about yourself, but how they perceive you as well. And I think that's super important.
I love that tip. That's super useful. I hope people go and do it. As always, we're going to be picking apart these topics. Next week is feedback, but we have strategic communication, we have storytelling, we have information theory and Claude Shannon, and a lot of math. We have all kinds of stuff ahead of us on this topic of communication. So get excited. Nick, thanks for hopping on today. We'll see you next week to talk about feedback.
Thanks.